From historic halls whose bounds harbor a range of artifacts alongside all manner of associated restless spirits, to prestigious plantations where it's rumored the vengeful souls of the formerly enslaved still wander after dark. Are you sure you're ready to brave our 5th list of picks for some of the most haunted mansions in the US? Number 5. Kykuit. Kykuit, or the John D. Rockefeller Estate, which is located off of Lake Road out of POCANTICO Hills, which in turn is a hamlet of Mount Pleasant, New York, is a former historic abode turned museum that's ridiculously famous for its housing of generations of what can widely be considered equivalent to one of America's royal families, the Rockefellers. Historically, mid-19th century, Rockefeller patriarch John D. would set his sights on the beautiful POCANTICO Hills area, and over the years would begin silently purchasing up homes and properties through the region, for which he planned to utilize to house himself, his family, staff, and other acquaintances and business relations. In 1893, John and his wife, Laura Spellman Rockefeller, would move into the Parsons Wentworth house. Unfortunately for the couple, however, their stay wouldn't be long, as on September 17th of 1902, the property would burn to the ground, after which the Rockefellers would take up residence within the Kent house instead, until 1913 when Kykuit was finally completed. Following John D.'s passing in 1937, Kykuit would be passed down to his son, philanthropist John D. Rockefeller Jr., and later to his grandson, 4-time governor of New York and vice POTUS under President Gerald Ford, Nelson A. Rockefeller. More recently, in 1991, Kykuit would be acquired under the National Trust for Historic Preservation, under the stipulation the family still be able to use the space when needed, and in 1994, some of the site's first public tours were offered. In the present, Kykuit remains open to the public, offering touring options and events year-round. Oh, and notably, it does still come under use of the family occasionally, during which times most of the expanse is usually closed down. Like something out of a blockbuster horror flick, owners, guests, staff, and officials to this weathered place of residence have reported a spine-tingling range of ghostly encounters, including extreme cold patches felt within temperature-controlled rooms, objects sighted moving on their own, and instances of doors opening and closing by themselves. Disembodied voices and footsteps echo through vacant halls. Phantom children have been detected about, seemingly playing and laughing their ways through the afterlife, and an odd, ghostly tune occasionally drifts on the winds. Several informal investigations of the expanse have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and orbs and shadowy figures captured in the backgrounds of photography and video, while others have told of the unnerving feelings of being followed or even of being brushed up against or touched by something unseen. Lastly, by far the most famous Kykuit legends claim its bounds haunted by the spirits of who else but the Rockefellers themselves, and run-ins with an entity bearing a likeness to John D. Sr. are all but common, some say as he forever keeps an eye over his beloved estate. Number 4. Liberty Hall. Liberty Hall, which is located off of Wilkinson Street out of Frankfort, Kentucky, is a historic house museum recognized as one of the earliest brick abodes across its aged city, with its bricks actually sourced directly from the clay dug up right from its very own cellar. Historically, in 1796, Senator John Brown would purchase a property on which he would begin construction of his dream estate. In 1800, a bulk of his house was completed, though it lacked glass windows, which would be added in later in 1804, and over the years, a handful of dependent structures were fashioned around the main house, including a kitchen, laundry facilities, a smokehouse, a privy, stables, a carriage house, and quarters for the site's enslaved. In 1835, the estate's grounds would be divided under John so that his sons could enjoy equal inheritances, with his eldest son, Mason, inheriting Liberty Hall, and with the adjacent Orlando Hall being constructed for his younger son and sharing his name, being that of Orlando. In 1934, last Liberty Hall resident and great-granddaughter to John, one Mary Mason Scott, would pass on, after which the hall would be left to her brother, John Matthew Scott, who would end up selling the expanse to a group of concerned interests who banded together to form the non-profit Liberty Hall Incorporated in order to assist in the preservation of the historic residence. In 1937, LHI would open the hall as a museum. Until 1955, the Orlando Brown House would remain occupied, after after which it was left to the National Society of Colonial Dames of America in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and the same year it too would be opened as a house museum. In the present, both Liberty Hall and the neighboring Orlando Brown House remain open as significant historic sites, offering seasonal touring options from March through November, while also playing host to a range of annual events and gatherings. While the object of this listing, being Liberty Hall, is rumored to be absolutely saturated in abnormal cold patches, poltergeist activity, shadowy manifestations, and all sorts of additional otherworldly phenomena, by far its most famous associated ghost story intertwines with actual history to tell of Margaretta Varick, who was the aunt of John Brown's wife, being Margaretta Mason Brown. As it's told, one night in 1817, Varick would become suddenly and violently sick and would pass on sight. Some suspect due to a heart attack resulting from exhaustion, indigestion, and other factors. While at this point, fact pretty well trails off to myth, various alterations to Varick's story would claim that her body was left in the old yard when the family cemetery was relocated, or that some more nefarious events transpired, resulting in her spirit's unrest. Whatever the case, a manifestation now recognized as the Grey Lady of Liberty Hall is often observed floating its corridors, has been known to bomb photo shoots, and even announces her presence when not visible by the phantom sounds of footsteps or with the swish of a skirt. Number 3. The House of the Seven Gables. The House of the Seven Gables, or the Turner Ingersoll Mansion, which is located off of Derby Street out of Salem, Massachusetts, is a prominent colonial-era abode recognized as one of the oldest surviving timber frame mansions in the whole of continental North America. Historically, in 1668, the earliest portion of the house was completed under Captain John Turner. In the following years, a kitchen lean-to and a north kitchen ell were added to the back of the house, and by 1678, the residents had welcomed an expansive extension to its front end as well. The weathered property would remain in Turner family hands for 3 generations until 1782, when, following John Turner III's loss of his entire family fortune, the space was acquired under Captain Samuel Ingersoll. In 1804, Ingersoll, who was literally an active captain through the Great Age of Sail, would perish at sea, preceding which his property was inherited by his daughter Susanna, who was actually the cousin of famed author Nathaniel Hawthorne, who, incidentally, credited his time at the home with inspiring the setting and title for his 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables. Sadly, in 1879, Ingersoll's adopted son, Horace Conley, would lose the property to creditors. In 1883, the Upton family would acquire the abode. In 1908, the site would be sold to one Caroline Emerton, who would set to work on a series of restorations and modernizations, and in 1910, the premises was open to the public. Notably, over her years, Emerton would acquire and move other properties related to Hawthorne to the Turner Street location. In 1994, a visitor's center was established, and in 2007, the aged mansion and its adjacent grounds would be listed as a National Historic Landmark District. In the present, the House of the Seven Gables remains open to the public, offering touring options of both the home and its gardens alongside a slew of events. Spanning the last century at the very least, the House of the Seven Gables has been shrouded in a range of spooky tales and reports of encounters with the otherworldly, and those frequenting its bounds have reported instances of doors that open and close on their own, lights that flick on and off by themselves, and ominous shadowy figures that stalk the living at a distance. On the mansion's iconic secret staircase, both visitors and staff have observed the manifestation of a man hurrying up or down, while the attic has been known to make its guests dizzy, nauseous, or even short of breath. Notably, this latter space is said to have once held servants' quarters, and many braving the attic have also reported disembodied voices and whispers, small giggles, and encounters with a spectral young boy suspected to be the spirit of Nathaniel Hawthorne's son, Julian. Also reported across house grounds are objects sighted moving on their own, extreme cold spots, disembodied voices, and encounters with a range of apparitions in clothing spanning the eras. Lastly, the son of Susanna Ingersoll herself has been spied drifting about, gazing from various windows, and seems especially fond of watching those who approach the house from the gardens. Number 2. Sweetwater Mansion. Sweetwater Mansion, which is located off of Sweetwater Avenue out of Florence, Alabama, is a prestigious historic home that, since shortly after its creation, has grown wildly in infamy due to an impressive slew of associated ghost stories and local legends. Historically, in 1828, construction of this formidable abode was started under General John Braun. However, unfortunately, in 1834, he would pass on before it was ever completed, after which Braun's son-in-law, Robert M. Patton, would complete the project by 1835. By 1860, and at 3,800 acres, Sweetwater would become recognized as one of the largest southern plantations around, and as such, sadly, boasted a 23-cabin village for its enslaved. Amidst the Civil War, on November 3rd of 1863, a Union force would camp out at the plantation overnight, and during their stay, the boys in blue would raid the property for food, gold, and other wartime assets, all the while absolutely terrorizing the family in the process. In 1865, Robert would be elected governor of Alabama, resulting in him letting the old property go, after which it would be passed through a range of owners and would fall further and further into disrepair. Much more recently, in 1976, Sweetwater was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in an attempt to save it from an uncertain fate, and as of the date of this upload, it rests under private ownership and is undergoing massive restorations that are being funded through occasional tours and alternative projects. Fitting the bill as your classic haunted mansion, Sweetwater is rumored to harbor an unknown number of supernatural entities tied to its past. Additionally, the site harbors a family cemetery and an unmarked yard for those formerly enslaved, and those braving the expanse have reported instances of doors opening and closing on their own, disembodied whispers detected from empty spaces, and objects observed moving or even floating through the air inexplicably. Disturbingly, years back, a Sweetwater caretaker described turning to find a casket in one of the downstairs rooms, and watching in horror as the lid slid from atop it to reveal a Confederate soldier inside. Shocked, this caretaker left the room for only seconds and returned to find the entire scene had vanished into thin air. Now, many suspect the entity or supernatural echo this caretaker experienced may have been tied to Governor Patton's son, Billy, whose funeral following the war was held on site. Incidentally, a specter bearing a likeness to the governor's wife, Jane, has also been sighted, usually weeping in the basement, likely over her son's untimely fate. Also reported across Sweetwater are accounts of a room that likes to lock its female visitors inside without warning, rumors of a former patron who lived upstairs many years back and who practiced dark magics within the lodging, disembodied giggles and the sounds of phantom children, shadowy figures, orbs and odd wafts of mist that float with seeming sentience, a ghostly Confederate soldier, and encounters with various full-bodied apparitions in clothing spanning the eras. Lastly, a strange space in the basement with no entrance and not but a tiny window to view through has since been dubbed the Secret Room, and it's now suspected that as many as 2 sons of former owners were buried beneath its floor. Number 1. Lynnewood Hall. Lynnewood Hall, which is located off of Spring Avenue out of ELKINS Park, Pennsylvania, is a 110-room neoclassical revival-style mansion that, though it now lies abandoned, is widely recognized as the largest surviving Gilded Age mansion in the Philadelphia area. Historically, from 1898 to 1900, this prestigious abode was initially constructed atop a 480-acre estate under streetcar tycoon, prolific art collector, and RMS Titanic investor Peter Errol Brown Widener. Notably, Peter's eldest son George Dunton Widener and grandson Henry Elkins Widener were actually both killed aboard the Titanic on its final fateful 1912 journey. Peter Widener would continue to reside at Lynnewood until 1915, preceding which the property was inherited by his only surviving son, Joseph E. Widener. Through their lives, both Peter and subsequently Joseph would accumulate impressive amassments of fine art, and incidentally, Lynnewood would play host to what was considered to be one of the most significant Gilded Age private European and decorative art collections not just in the state or country, but in the world. From 1915 to 1940, Lynnewood's expansive art collections were open to the public through appointments. In 1940, Joseph would donate more than 2,000 paintings, sculptures, decorative works, and porcelains to the National Gallery of Art, and following his passing 3 years later in 1943, a good portion of estate lands were sold off while the mansion was kept for a time. In 1952, the property would be acquired under the Faith Theological Seminary, who, over the following 4 decades, would utilize utilize its grounds to train hundreds, if not thousands, of ministers and Christian leaders. Through the early 1990s, attendance would dwindle, and in 1996, the site was picked up by the First Korean Church of New York, who in turn would leave it abandoned once more. More recently, in 2022, the Lynnewood Hall Preservation Foundation was established, and currently, like so many of the other success stories we've had the privilege of covering in the past, is in the process of battling, fundraising, and creating awareness in an effort to purchase the estate outright and restore it to its former glory. Currently, the only way to visit Lynnewood is by owner permission, and the site itself is maintained by a single live-in caretaker and, from what we hear, one heck of an advanced security system. Chillingly, long-standing legends surrounding Lynnewood claim its bounds haunted by a host of apparitions tied to it in lives since past, and those who have had the good fortune of visiting the expanse have reported disembodied voices detected from vacant spaces, footsteps heard through empty hallways, and instances of doors, windows, drawers, or cabinets opening and closing by themselves. Several informal investigations of Lynnewood have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and orbs and half-formed silhouettes in the backgrounds of photography and video, while those passing by on the street have described eerie lights observed through the windows flitting about, and pale, ghostly faces that manifest suddenly. Easily the most famous local legends tied to this weathered abode tell that the souls of the Widener men, or at least pieces of them, linger, forever keeping watch over the property they so cherished. Incidentally, and rather curiously, over its many years of abandonment, the site has played witness to very little damage in the way of graffiti, vandalism, etc., and is surprisingly well preserved, leading some to believe the Widener's phantoms have been responsible for chasing away the less savory types. Taking its fascinatingly eloquent history into account, and coupling it with such an impressive range of associated tales of terror and purports of encounters with the beyond, we felt Lynnewood Hall was a perfect choice as this list's most haunted mansion in the US. Thanks for tuning in for our 5th list of picks for some of the most haunted mansions in the United States. If you enjoyed hearing our histories and ghost stories, subscribe to our channel, like this upload, and share us with anyone you feel could use a good scare. We'll catch you all next time.